I have loved her for 22 years. She is my world, my greatest success, and the one person who never questioned our bond. But 2 months ago, he walked into her life. The man whose face I vowed she would never see. Her biological father. Now they're dating, and she is glowing with a happiness I can't fake. I know his truth. A past so toxic it could ruin her life. I have the power to save her with 5 simple, devastating words. He is your father. But telling her means proving that every promise, every loving assurance I've ever given her was built on a lie. I am the only one who can protect her from him, but I can only do it by making her hate me forever. Before we begin this impossible story, please take a moment to like, comment, and share this video. Your participation is the only thing that can guide my choice. The first time I held Chloe, she was only 14 months old, a tiny, wide-eyed thing with a stubborn curl right in the center of her forehead. I didn't see a foster child, or an adopted child, or even a child with a history. I saw my future. I saw the daughter I had dreamed of, and in that instant I made a silent, sacred promise. I will protect you from everything, especially the demons you were born with. For 22 years, I kept that promise. I raised Chloe, pronounced Chloe as she often corrects people, to be everything I wasn't. Confident, curious, and utterly fearless. She is now 22, fresh out of college, armed with a degree in graphic design, and still possesses that stubborn, beautiful curl. Our relationship is the bedrock of my life. She calls me mom without hesitation, and there is an unspoken depth of love and comfort between us that I cherished every single day. The fact of her adoption was never hidden. It was a simple, beautiful truth that only bonded us closer. But the details of her biological parents, those I buried. The most critical secret I kept, the lie I built her life on, was the identity of her biological father. His file, which I reviewed only once before the adoption was finalized, was short but terrifying. It detailed a history of instability, primarily fueled by a crippling addiction to prescription painkillers that had spiraled into something darker. There was a stretch of time, a stint in county jail for a minor theft charge that stemmed from his need to feed his habit. That cemented my decision. He was a volatile man, consumed by his own chaos, and he was completely unfit to raise a child. So, I did what I believed any fiercely protective mother would do. I worked with the adoption agency to change her last name entirely, wiped every trace of his name from her immediate paperwork, and took a vow of complete silence. I rationalized it as an act of selfless protection. I wasn't denying her history. I was ensuring her safety and stability. I believed the lie of omission was the foundation of her stable life. I destroyed all the documents, thinking that if I couldn't be tempted to reveal the secret, she couldn't be accidentally exposed to his darkness. But in the last 6 months, something has shifted. Chloe has started to ask about her biological parents with a new, quiet urgency. Not out of resentment, but out of a deep-seated curiosity about where her talents come from. "Why am I so good at color theory, Mom?" she asked me last month. "Where does this passion for design come from? Was my biological mother an artist?" I gave the usual vague, loving answers that her gifts were all her own, that they came from the unique soul I raised. But the questions began to chip away at the fortress I built. I noticed her spending hours online, searching ancestry sites and adoption forums. She wasn't looking for a replacement mother, but a mirror, a genetic echo. She felt a profound absence in her life, a void that I, with all my love, simply couldn't fill. It was during one of these searches, ironically, that she mentioned a man she met at an art gallery opening. She was bubbling with excitement, talking about the instant, uncanny connection she felt with him. She talked about his intensity, his artistic eye, and the fact that he was nearly 15 years her senior. She called him David. I smiled and nodded, masking the cold dread that started to coil in my stomach. She was just looking for a mentor, I told myself. She was looking for a connection. But then she mentioned his surname, and I felt the 22-year-old lie crack, leaving me exposed to the exact danger I had sworn to destroy. That surname was the same, the very one I had tried to erase from existence. And I knew, before I had a single shred of proof, that the ghost I'd buried in the past had just walked straight into my daughter's heart. It happened at Sunday brunch. Chloe was swirling cream into her coffee, her eyes sparkling, and she launched into a story about a new gallery exhibit she had attended the night before with David. She was utterly mesmerized by him. The way he talked about composition, his insight into her design work, the intensity of his gaze when he listened to her. She described him not just as a boyfriend, but as a kindred spirit, someone who saw her in a way no one else ever had. "Mom," she said, leaning forward, her voice hushed with disbelief, "you won't believe it." I told him how I've always felt this strange pull towards abstract expressionism, and he just finished my sentence. He said it's because of the controlled chaos in my style. He understands my brain. It's like we share a history we never had. I forced a smile, stirring my own coffee until it was a murky brown. The anxiety I felt wasn't normal maternal protectiveness. It was the sharp, metallic taste of certainty. David was older, yes, 37 to Chloe's 22, and he had the sort of dark, brooding charisma that felt immediately dangerous. But none of that mattered until she gave me the final, crushing detail. "And guess what else?" she giggled. "He's an architect. He works on these huge restoration projects. His last name is Stone. David Stone." The spoon clattered against the porcelain cup. The sound was deafening. I felt the blood drain from my face, turning the brightly lit restaurant into a dizzying white blur. Stone, the name I had fought so hard to eradicate. It wasn't a common name, not like Smith or Jones. It was rare, distinctive, and I had deliberately chosen a new surname for Chloe 2 decades ago to ensure this exact scenario would be impossible. I forced myself to breathe. "Stone, that's a beautiful name, honey. What kind of architecture?" Chloe, too wrapped up in her own joy to notice my sudden pallor, launched into a detailed description of his work. It didn't matter. The rest of the conversation was just noise. My brain was a forensic lab, comparing the details of the man sitting in front of me to the nightmare in the closed file. The age difference, the creative intensity, the name. It was too precise to be coincidence. I knew, deep in the pit of my stomach, that I was looking at the genetic bond manifesting itself in the most horrifying way possible. Chloe was experiencing a subconscious, overwhelming connection to the bloodline she never knew. A tragic echo of fate pulling her back toward the very man I had sworn to protect her from. She saw a deep, soulful bond. I saw a biological siren song leading her into a history of darkness and volatility. For the rest of the meal, I felt the terrifying weight of the truth. David Stone was the man who had signed away his rights 22 years ago, the man whose past included theft and addiction, the man I had erased from her life in a desperate act of love. Now he was back, sitting across from her, using his charm and his expertise to woo the daughter he was genetically linked to. Did he know? Was he searching for her, or had fate played a cruel joke? Either way, he was a ticking time bomb, and Chloe was utterly oblivious, mistaking a genetic pull for true love. I sat there, staring at my daughter's glowing face, realizing my lie of protection had failed. The danger I tried to hide had found her anyway. I was terrified not just of David Stone, but of the moment when I would have to choose between the safety of her future and the sacred trust we had built over a lifetime. I spent 2 days functioning on pure panic and minimal sleep. I stopped going into my office. I just sat at my kitchen table, my laptop open, staring at the search bar as if the internet held the key to unseeing what I now knew. I needed proof, something concrete to replace the horrifying theory that was eating me alive. I needed to know if David Stone was merely a coincidence or the man who had abandoned my baby girl over 2 decades ago. My first thought was the adoption agency, but those files were sealed tighter than a vault. Then I remembered Mrs. Peterson, the kind, elderly social worker who had handled Chloe's original placement. I had her personal email, which I'd used to send Christmas cards for years. I sent her a frantic, brief message, omitting the specifics but mentioning the sudden appearance of the biological father's extremely rare name in a familial context. Mrs. Peterson called me back within the hour, her voice laced with immediate concern. She had worked with David Stone and his chaotic past. She remembered the case vividly. "You changed the name legally, right?" she asked, her voice hushed. "Yes, 22 years ago. His name was Stone," I confirmed, whispering the name like a curse. "It still is," she said softly. "The records are sealed, but legally, I can verify one piece of non-identifying information for your peace of mind. Tell me something only the file would know." My mind raced. David's legal name at the time of surrender was one thing. His distinguishing marks were another. I remembered one bizarre, small detail from the file. A photograph showing a large, crescent-shaped birthmark on the back of his left shoulder. It was noted because it was so prominent. "Does he," I asked, my voice cracking, "have a noticeable birthmark on his back?" There was a long pause, and then Mrs. Peterson's sigh came through the line, heavy and defeated. "I'm sorry, dear. Yes, the file noted a unique crescent mark on the left scapula. I remember because he was quite ashamed of it." The world tilted. The theoretical horror was now a verified fact. David Stone, the man who was charming my daughter, cooking her dinner, and weaving himself into her life, was indeed her biological father. My protective lie of omission had led her directly into the path of the man I had fought to save her from. But the confirmation didn't end there. Mrs. Peterson, knowing the gravity of the situation, added one more detail. He filed a petition to unseal the records 2 years ago. It was denied, but he was actively searching for her. This single sentence confirmed my greatest fear. David wasn't a man who had accidentally stumbled upon his daughter. He was deceiving her. He knew, or strongly suspected, who Chloe was and was actively hiding their true, dangerous relationship. He was exploiting the uncanny connection she felt to manipulate his way back into her life, or perhaps just a life. I hung up the phone, the receiver feeling cold and slick in my sweaty palm. I looked across the room at the desk where Chloe had left her portfolio open, a vibrant, fearless piece of art. And I realized the full scope of the tragedy. David Stone's past was a swamp of addiction, legal issues, and instability. I didn't know if he was clean now, but I knew he was currently guilty of gross deception. He was lying to Chloe, robbing her of her agency and the truth of her identity, all while leveraging her genetic draw against her. I had destroyed the documents, but I couldn't destroy the genes. Now, the lie I chose for her safety had delivered her straight to the man who could destroy her. My mind screamed at me to speak the truth, to save her from the danger lurking beneath David's charm. But a cold voice whispered back, "Tell her and you lose her forever." Telling her would mean confessing that for 22 years I had held the most critical secret of her life, proving that my love, however fierce, was rooted in deception. I had to choose. Is her freedom from a dangerous man worth her complete abandonment of me? The final, crushing piece of the puzzle was not the confirmation of his identity, but the realization of the perfect trap I had set for myself 22 years ago. I thought I was protecting Chloe from a monster. Instead, I created the conditions for her to fall in love with him, mistaking a powerful biological current for destiny. Now, the truth is a weapon with 2 equally devastating targets. I sat there, watching Chloe later that evening, happily texting David from the sofa. Her face was illuminated by the screen's glow, radiating a joyous, new happiness I hadn't seen since she was a child. It was the happiness of a young woman who finally felt seen and validated in her artistic spirit. David, her father, was feeding that need, leveraging the exact genetic compatibility I had so feared. And the truth I held was capable of instantly extinguishing that light. If I tell her the truth now, the whole truth, she will be safe from David's current deception and potential danger. She will break off the relationship, and I will have saved her from entering a toxic cycle. But the cost is my complete and total destruction in her eyes. She will see the last 22 years as a calculated, continuous lie. She won't hear, "I protected you from an addict." She will hear, "I chose to withhold your entire identity for over 2 decades." Her heart will break over the betrayal of her biological roots, and she will inevitably walk away from me, believing I am a controlling, deceitful mother who stole her right to know herself. I would be safe, but utterly alone. If I stay silent, if I choose to preserve our beautiful, loving trust, Chloe remains happy and our bond remains intact. She will continue dating David, believing this dangerous deception is true love or fate. I would have to live every single day knowing I am knowingly allowing her to build a life with a man who has a history of addiction and criminal behavior, who is currently lying to her about their fundamental relationship. I would be choosing trust over her safety, gambling her future happiness on the hope that David is truly reformed. If he relapses, or if she uses her, the guilt would consume me. And when she eventually discovers the truth, which she will, the betrayal will be doubled, and the loss of her trust will be permanent anyway. I realize then that there is no win for the mother in this scenario. I have a choice between 2 equally devastating forms of abandonment. Choice A, abandon the lie, lose the daughter, or choice B, preserve the trust, risk the daughter's future. I looked at her, my beautiful, trusting Chloe, and the realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. The moment I confirmed David's identity, my future with her was over. The only variable left is how it ends. Do I take the hit now to save her? Or do I risk her future to save our present? I am trapped between my protective duty and the foundation of our love, and I cannot choose which one to sacrifice. The truth is my only weapon, but the blast radius is set to destroy my heart. I knew the past was bad, but I needed to know the present. David Stone was not just a ghost from a 22-year-old file. He was a man operating now. Was he truly reformed? A successful architect who had merely stumbled into a heartbreaking coincidence? Or was the darkness still swirling around him, ready to consume my daughter? I had to find evidence of his current life, regardless of how painful the search might be. I started digging, using the professional details Chloe had so innocently shared. His architecture firm, his recent restoration projects. It was surprisingly easy to find him online. David Stone was legitimate. He had a company website, a professional headshot, and a portfolio that spoke to real success. For a brief, terrifying moment, I allowed myself a shred of hope. Maybe he was a new man. Maybe the genetic connection was the only link. That hope was instantly crushed by a small, obscure mention buried deep in the archives of a local business journal. It wasn't about his architecture. It was about his financial status. The article was a dry piece detailing a lawsuit from 6 months ago, a civil claim filed against David Stone by a small, specialty construction lender. The details were complex, involving alleged mishandling of funds on a major restoration project and a claim of over $150,000 in defaulted loans. The tone was professional, but the implication was devastating. David was either financially reckless or engaged in outright fraud. I dug deeper, cross-referencing public legal records with the names mentioned in the article. The civil lawsuit was still open, with multiple outstanding motions. But worse than the financial troubles was what I found next. A recent police blotter report from 3 weeks prior. The name David Stone matched the address of his last known apartment. The charge? Possession of a controlled substance and a minor assault charge involving a late-night dispute with a creditor. He had been released on bail, the case pending. The breath left my lungs. He wasn't just deceiving Chloe. He was actively, currently dangerous. The addiction hadn't disappeared. It was being masked by a veneer of professional success and the sudden, intense focus on my daughter. His past wasn't a history lesson. It was his present reality. He was a man fighting a massive financial collapse and still struggling with drug use, the exact cycle of chaos I had paid decades ago to erase from Chloe's life. The reality hit me. David wasn't seeking a connection, he was seeking a landing pad, a distraction, a source of stability, or maybe even an emotional anchor to keep him from drowning. Chloe, in her radiant, ambitious innocence, was his victim, his perfect, trusting mark. Their uncanny connection wasn't fate. It was the desperation of an addict who had found the one person genetically wired to empathize with him. I closed the laptop, the cool metal pressing against my trembling hands. The moral calculus instantly shifted. This was no longer a debate over whether a lie was acceptable. This was a choice between allowing my daughter to enter a relationship with a man who is actively engaged in self-destruction and criminal behavior, or telling the devastating truth that destroys the loving relationship she has with me. The price of my silence had gone from emotional pain to existential danger. David Stone was a loaded gun, and Chloe was walking straight into his firing line. I had to intervene. But how do you save a child when the act of saving them proves you are a liar? My discovery of David's current legal mess only intensified the crushing need to intervene. Yet the act of intervention felt more destructive than ever. I was trying to save Chloe from a danger she didn't believe existed, and my only tool was the betrayal of 22 years of unconditional love. That evening, Chloe came home with her arms full of art supplies and a smile so wide it made my heart ache. "David is amazing, Mom," she announced, dumping the bags onto the kitchen island. "He spent his entire lunch break helping me structure my portfolio website. He's making me see my designs in a way I never did before. He said I have this inherited sensitivity to balance and form, a natural architectural eye." She spoke the words inherited sensitivity with a sort of reverence, unaware of the terrifying truth behind them. I watched her, the dread tightening in my throat. David was not just helping her. He was actively feeding the narrative of destiny, the very genetic echo she was so desperately searching for. He was weaving a beautiful, irresistible lie, reinforcing the idea that they were uniquely linked, twin souls finally reunited. "He's giving me the confidence I couldn't get from school," she continued, oblivious to my silence. "My professors taught me the rules, but David, he understands the chaos behind the rules. He's already set up meetings for me with 3 galleries for next month. He says they'll love my unfiltered stone aesthetic." Stone aesthetic. The phrase was like a physical punch. She was so proud to identify with the name he carried, completely unaware that she was celebrating her own genetic bond with a man currently facing a drug charge. The uncanny connection she felt was real. It was a biological imperative, a daughter pulled toward the father she was deprived of, but he was manipulating that genuine yearning for his own selfish reasons. He was giving her exactly what she felt was missing: validation of her origin story. It was a need I could never fulfill, not because I lacked love, but because I lacked the correct DNA. I couldn't talk about the chaos behind the rules of her design, because that chaos in his life translated to addiction and legal ruin. I couldn't understand her stone aesthetic because I had deliberately tried to destroy the source of it. This realization made my choice even harder. If I exposed David, Chloe wouldn't just be losing a dangerous boyfriend, she would be losing the one person who finally gave her the answer she was searching for, the answer to who she was. She would feel the genetic connection she craved was stolen from her, and the blame would land squarely on me for keeping the secret for 2 decades. I swallowed my fear and asked, "Does he ever talk about his family, Chloe? His past?" She paused, tapping her chin with a pencil. "Not much. He says his family situation is complicated, but that he's a self-made man. He said he had a rough early life, but he pulled himself out of it with hard work and pure ambition. That's another thing I love about him, Mom. He knows what it's like to have to fight for everything." The narrative David had constructed was impeccable: a reformed, charismatic mentor, a successful architect who understood her soul, a fighter who had conquered a rough early life. Every word was a lie designed to exploit her need for genetic validation. The more he pulled her in with these false truths, the deeper the wound would be when I inevitably ripped the truth from her hands. I could see the abyss opening up. On one side, Chloe's happiness and identity being built on the active lies of an addict. On the other, the devastation of her discovering that the mother she trusts implicitly is the reason she is now in danger. I was powerless to protect her without proving myself a liar. I had to wait for the final piece of the twist, the confrontation with David, before I could hand over the gavel to the court of public opinion. I couldn't endure the silence any longer. Chloe was going out with David that Friday evening for a formal gallery event, a step that felt too permanent, too public. I had to confront him. I couldn't risk revealing the truth in front of Chloe, so I chose the afternoon. I texted him, using the pretext of an urgent renovation question to lure him to the house while Chloe was out running errands. He arrived promptly, dressed impeccably, a bouquet of wildflowers in his hand for Chloe. He played the part of the devoted, charming boyfriend flawlessly. But the moment I closed the front door and led him into the living room, his demeanor shifted. "Chloe mentioned you're having trouble with your lighting fixtures," he started, his voice smooth. "We both know why you're here, David." I cut him off, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. I walked over to the coffee table and placed two printouts side by side: the civil lawsuit against David Stone and the police blotter report showing his recent arrest for possession. "This is why you're really here. You're not just an architect. You're a fugitive from your own life, and you are deliberately dating your daughter." The color drained from his face instantly, replaced by a sickly gray pallor. He didn't deny it. He sank into the nearest armchair, the picture of polished composure crumbling into the wreck I remembered from the adoption file. "You knew," he whispered, staring at the floor. "You always knew." "I knew who you were," I corrected sharply. "I didn't know you would hunt her down. I didn't know you would deceive her." "Why, David? Why lie about who you are?" He finally looked up, and the desperation in his eyes was naked and raw. "It wasn't a hunt. I recognized her name at the gallery, her adopted name. I knew it was her immediately, but I didn't want to scare her off. I didn't want the 20 years of garbage to ruin this. Don't you see, I'm not choosing her, she's saving me. She's the only good thing that has ever happened to me. The only reason I am staying clean now. Her belief in me, her talent, the connection, it works better than any rehab I ever went to." He leaned forward, the desperation turning into a desperate plea. "I know I have no right to ask this, but you cannot tell her the truth. I am telling you, if you take that connection away from me, if you tell her who I really am, she will cut me out completely. And I will relapse. I will lose my job. I will lose this last chance, and I will die. Please, for her sake, and for mine, you have to let this lie be the truth." The twist was brutal and final. David wasn't just a threat. He was a fragile soul claiming my daughter's love was the only tether to his sobriety. If I exposed him to Chloe, I would save her from his dangerous present, but I would simultaneously condemn him to a probable death by relapse, a death I would be solely responsible for. And Chloe, the daughter who hates the addiction that ruined his life, would eventually discover that her mother chose to let her father die just to preserve a lie. I looked at David Stone, the man who was both a danger to my daughter and a man fighting for his life, and I realized the moral cost had doubled again. I was trapped between protecting Chloe's future and ensuring David's immediate relapse and death. My choice was no longer about honesty versus betrayal. It was about choosing which life or death I could endure. The ethical knot was now impossibly tight. David's desperate plea didn't leave the house with him. It settled heavily on my shoulders, heavier than any maternal duty I had ever known. He was gone, but his ultimatum, "tell her and I die," remained, merging with the haunting realization that my love for Chloe had created this deadly symmetry. I walked around the living room, picking up the printouts of David's arrest record, his civil suits, and placing them beside the cherished photos of Chloe's childhood, all evidence in the trial, where I was the sole judge and the only witness. I had always believed my job was to protect my daughter, but now I was faced with protecting her from one person while simultaneously causing the death of another. This was the crushing reality of the ethical trap I had fallen into. I began to weigh the two options not rationally, but with the full, agonizing weight of a mother's conscience. Choice A, tell Chloe the truth. This is the clean, definitive choice. It is the only way to guarantee her immediate physical and financial safety from David's chaos. The deception ends, the relationship dissolves, and she is protected from the active danger of his addiction and legal ruin. But the price is irreversible. I would be handing her a mirror that reflects 22 years of my lie. She will feel violated, abandoned a second time, and the trust that is the very lifeblood of our relationship will be instantly severed. I would be safe, but our bond would be reduced to a bitter memory. I would have sacrificed my own daughter's love to preserve her safety, and she would spend years, perhaps forever, believing her adoptive mother was the villain who stole her identity. Choice B, stay silent. This preserves the beautiful, loving relationship we have now. Chloe remains happy, feeling validated by her uncanny connection to David, and our mother-daughter bond remains intact. I would avoid causing the immediate relapse and probable death of David Stone, meaning his life and his current sobriety would rest on my silence. But this choice requires me to become an active accomplice in the deception. I would be knowingly placing my daughter in proximity to an unexploded bomb of debt, addiction, and legal trouble. Every date they went on, every sweet message she received would be a fresh dagger of guilt. If David relapsed and hurt her, or if Chloe discovered the truth later, perhaps after having children with him, the ultimate betrayal would be far deeper. I would be choosing trust over safety, sacrificing her future peace for my own momentary comfort. The moral weight of David's life, a life currently dependent on the lie, is the twist I can't reconcile. His addiction is a sickness, not malice, and my words could kill him. But Chloe's safety is paramount. I am asked to choose between two profound, fatal violations, violating my daughter's trust to save her, or violating my own conscience to save the man who threatens her. The only truth remaining is that whatever I choose, I will be haunted. If I speak, I lose my daughter's heart. If I stay silent, I risk her life and carry David's life on my conscience. This dilemma is not about what is right, but what is the least destructive? And I am utterly incapable of determining which loss is the lesser. The courtroom of my heart is adjourned, and I must turn to the only jury left. I have told you the entire truth. I have laid bare the facts, the lies, and the crushing consequences of either path. The moral clock is ticking, and I cannot move. I am a mother, not a deity, and I cannot choose which one of my children I am going to wound fatally. I must ask you, the collective conscience of this audience, to look at this story stripped of sentimentality and render the judgment I am too compromised to deliver. This is the agonizing weight of the dilemma. On one side is the need for honesty and protection. On the other, the fierce, 22-year-old need for love and trust. If I choose to be honest, I save her from ruin, but ruin our relationship. If I choose silence, I keep my daughter's love, but risk her life. Look closely at the cost of choice A. Tell Chloe the truth. This is the only way to guarantee her safety. She will break up with David instantly. She will be protected from his current chaos, his addiction, and his financial troubles. She will be safe. But I will have to hand her the proof that her entire adult life, her sense of stability, and the identity she created were built upon a foundation of my deceit. She will see me not as the mother who protected her, but as the woman who stole her right to know herself, and she will walk away, perhaps forever. I will have traded my daughter's permanent love for her temporary safety. Now look at the cost of choice B. Stay silent. This preserves the sacred, loving trust between us. It protects David, who believes Chloe is the fragile anchor keeping him sober and alive. If I choose this, I remain her beloved mother, and the immediate threat of David's death is averted. But I become an active accomplice to the lie. I am gambling with my daughter's future, knowingly allowing her to invest her heart, her career, and her life in a relationship built on his deception and his documented, dangerous instability. If David relapses, or she finds the truth years from now, the pain and the resentment will be twice as deep, and she will still leave me, but with a ruined life. I am paralyzed because both paths lead to an unendurable loss. I cannot bear to be the reason David dies, nor can I bear to be the reason Chloe's life is consumed by the very demons I vowed to protect her from. There is no simple answer here, no clear line between right and wrong, only varying degrees of pain and irreversible consequence. I have exhausted my love, my wisdom, and my strength. I am turning the final, crushing decision over to you. I am asking you to judge. Is a lifetime of my daughter's love and trust worth risking her potential safety and life, or is her immediate protection worth the devastation of our bond? I need your verdict now. The anguish is now complete. I have laid every piece of evidence, both emotional and legal, before you, the only jury I trust. My life with Chloe hangs in this agonizing balance, and I must now move to the final, necessary act of this trial, securing your verdict. This is the moment where my story ends and our collective decision begins. I want you to imagine the two outcomes clearly, remembering that in this impossible choice, there is no escape from pain. The choice is not between a happy ending and a sad one. It is between a devastating loss now and a potentially catastrophic loss later. If you choose option A, tell Chloe the truth, you are choosing the absolute certainty of safety. You believe that a mother's primary duty is protection from clear and present danger, regardless of the emotional cost. You accept that Chloe will likely break our bond forever, but she will be safe from David's deception, his drug use, and his financial instability. You choose to save her future by sacrificing our past. You vote that the trust one built on a lie must be shattered to make room for a harsh, but necessary, truth. If you choose option B, stay silent, you are choosing the preservation of trust and life. You believe that David's current sobriety, tied to Chloe's love, holds a greater moral weight than the risk to Chloe's stability. You believe that breaking a mother-daughter bond of 22 years is a destruction too great to justify, especially when the danger, David, has a chance to reform. You accept the guilt of my complicity, betting that the truth will remain buried and that David will stay clean. You choose to preserve the love we share now, gambling her safety on a chance at a different, better ending. I am setting up the official poll right now, and I implore you to cast your vote with the gravity this situation deserves. This is more than a comment section debate. This is a moral mandate. Your collective judgment is the only thing that will give me the courage or the moral justification to act. I will wait for your verdict. I promise you this. I will follow the majority decision. The court of public opinion will deliver the final verdict, and I will narrate the painful, immediate aftermath of that choice in the follow-up video, what I should do. The verdict next week. Please tell me. Vote A. Tell Chloe the truth. Choose safety over trust. Vote B. Stay silent. Choose trust over safety. Thank you for being my judge. I am now in your hands.